Glad to see you all back on such a nice day, too. That's saying something about your love of the Lord, that you'll, even on a day like today, but, you know, we're going to have lots of these kind of days when we make it to heaven. So, and we'll have lots of them in eternity. I found out something last week, that God has a sense of humor. I was preparing some thoughts for like next week and the week after, and there were some issues that came up and I just didn't have the answer for it. And I was talking to God, and I said, "Now you promised that if I asked, that I would receive it, and if I would seek, I would find." So I took him at his word, and I started seeking the Bible and seeking commentaries, and I found the answer. But you know what else I found? More questions. So I'm going back to the same routine. Oh, God, you promised. Just kind of review just a little bit, make sure we're all on the same page, we understand what we're doing in Revelation. We did chapters 1 through 3, 7 letters, 7 churches, and that was an exhortation by Jesus to these churches to get their act together, to be a beacon for the lost and a bastion for the saved. Then we went to chapters 4 and 5. That was the throne room of heaven. And the focus on chapter 4 was worship. But in chapter 5, if you remember, that the focus was on a scroll. And I believe from the context of Revelation that was the kinsman redeemer scroll. And I hadn't really heard about that until I started studying it. But it makes perfect sense. And that scroll was to redeem the earth and give it to Jesus. He's the one that inherits the earth. And as these legal documents go, then he opens those seals. He has the right to open those seals, and inside is really the deed. It says that he owns it. And like I said, we could get into some doctrinal things that I'm not going to go into in this session, but so we just take it that's what it was. It's a deed to the earth, and it's title deed to the earth. And as he goes through these seals, then different things start showing. Well, in chapter 6 and 7, and this is something that I really believe is true, again, from the context. If we go back to Matthew 24, when the disciples ask, "What are the signs of your coming?" And you can take line by line and go through chapter 6 and chapter 7, and that's exactly what he's talking about. So it's an overview of the rest of the tribulation period. So that makes a whole lot of sense. And then you take everything else from chapter 8 to 18, and you just stick it in there someplace. And we're going to kind of do that here in a little bit. We're going to start sticking things in there. So that's where we are. Now, next week, we're going to be doing the rise of the beast. The week after that, it'll be Armageddon, which would include the last half of the tribulation time, or the last half of the 7 years. And then the final teaching period will be on the millennial kingdom. But next week, if you can, I think you're going to want to be here. It's going to be a little bit different. I've got some more handouts I'm going to give you. And what we're going to do is a disciplined study of the book of Revelation. And what I'm going to do, because we're going to be talking about the beast, and there are a lot of different ideas of who the beast is, what the 7 heads are, what the 7 horns are, what the 10 crowns are. who the woman is that's riding the beast and the harlot, and it goes on and on and on. What are all these things? And if we go with a disciplined study, and on these sheets that I'm going to give you, one's going to be 27 characteristics of the Antichrist, and then there's going to be some more, actually the hermeneutics that we already have, but I've put them in one place so we won't have to search around for it. But I'm going to ask the questions, and then you will tell me the answer. Now, it's not going to be hard, because the answer is going to be right there in front of you. Like when I say, well, what are the 7 heads? It's going to be right there in front of you. So we'll understand what's being talked about in this rise of the beast. And I was surprised as I went through the exercise. I was surprised at the conclusions that I think you have to come to when you do that disciplined study. Because if you listen to some of the people talking about this, sometimes the heads mean one thing, sometimes the mountains mean something else. So we don't want to do that. So I think you're going to enjoy that. Now tonight, we're going to finish up chapter 6. We went through the 4 horsemen. That was my goal last week, go through the 4 horsemen. And now we're at the 5th seal. When the Lamb broke the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of all who have been martyred for the word of God and for being faithful in their testimony. They shouted to the Lord and said, O sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long before you and the people who belong to this world, how long before you judge the people who belong to this world and avenge our blood for what they have done to us? Then a white robe was given to each one of them, and they were told to rest a little longer until a full number of their brothers and sisters, their fellow servants of Jesus who were to be martyred, had joined them. There's something special about the people that are martyred. In fact, we'll see in just a little bit that I thought that was my ringing on the. It must be somebody mowing outside. But it'll show that they have a special place in heaven. They'll actually be worshiping in front of God in His throne room. But they have a special crown. Now, there's different crowns that we Christians will have that we will eventually lay down before Christ, because it's the work that Christ did in us, not of our own works or our own effort did we do it. But they get this, what I call a martyr's crown, but it's called the crown of life in James 1:12, for those believers who endure trials, tribulations, and severe suffering, even unto death. Then Revelation 2:8 through 11 said this crown is also referred to as the martyr's crown. But it's promised to anybody who perseveres even to death that they're going to get this crown. And these people that have been martyred, and those are the ones that have been martyred from far back, even the prophets would be, the prophets that were murdered, they'll be receiving that crown as well. But they also received a white robe, but they were told to wait. God wants to get them all together so that they all can be together. Like I say, they have a special place. Now, one of the things that I thought was unusual were that they were under the altar. And that's one of the things I went searching for. Under the altar, what do you mean? Well, when the priests in the Levitical days, when they would sacrifice animals, the blood would run off the top of the altar down the sides, and it would collect along the bottom. This is a symbolic response to those people. It says their blood cried out. I know the blood has something special, and that's another study I probably will do sometime in the future. The blood has something special to it, and I don't quite understand it, but when Cain killed Abel, God called out and said, his blood calleth out from the ground. So there's something about that blood. And God looks at martyrs as a sacrifice. I went through that. In earthly sacrifice, the blood runs to the base of the altar. And it seems to be symbolic that the blood ran under the heavenly altar, crying out to God for vengeance. God surely does communicate with the blood. And something that has bothered me for years and years. 70 million babies have, I call it being martyred. They've been martyred, 70 million babies since Roe v. Wade. And I believe their blood is crying out. And God help those that are guilty of that. Then we go to the sixth seal. We see that there's a great earthquake. The sun darkened, the moon red as blood, stars falling, the lost plead to be hidden. And this is getting way down towards the end of the tribulation period. And it says, I watched as the Lamb broke the sixth seal, and there was a great earthquake. The sun became as dark as black cloth, and the moon became red as blood. Then the stars of the sky fell to the earth like green figs falling from a tree shaken by a strong wind. The sky was rolled up like a scroll, and all the mountains and islands were moved from their places. Then everyone, the kings of the earth, the rulers, the generals, the wealthy, the powerful, every slave and free person, all hid themselves in caves and among the rocks and the mountains. And they cried to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of the one who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who is able to survive? So that tells me that's the end of the tribulation. Again, this is the overview of what's going on. And we see a comparison in Revelation chapter 16, 18 through 20. Then the thunder crashed and rolled, and lightning flashed, and a great earthquake struck, and the worst since people were placed on the earth. And the great city Babylon split in three sections, and the city of many nations fell into heaps and rubble. So God remembered all the Babylon's sins, and he made her drink the cup that was filled with the wine of his fierce wrath, and every island disappeared, and all the mountains were leveled. So I think those, from what I can tell, those are the same thing. So again, this is the overview. I don't know if you guys remember, some time ago there was an earthquake that, and my memory's not that good on it, but there was a tremendous tidal wave that wrecked Southeast Asia. But the earthquake that they had at that time actually knocked the earth off its axis a little bit. And they had to recalibrate an island that was out there because it actually moved. So they had to recalibrate it with the GPS. So this stuff is real. This is going to happen, only it's going to be worse than anything that anybody here on the earth has ever seen. Chapter 7. And this continues still with the overview. Then I saw four angels standing on the four corners of the earth, holding back the four winds, that they do not blow on the earth or the sea or even on any tree. And I saw the angel coming up from the east, carrying the seal of the living God. And he shouted to those four angels who had been given power to harm the land and the sea. And I think those probably were fallen angels that are going to do this. I'm not sure about that. Wait, don't harm the land or the sea or the trees until we have placed the seal of God on the forehands of these servants. And it goes down through all these, and I heard how many were marked with the seal of God. Now, the seal of God is protection for those people. They have a job to do, and these are going to be evangelists, Jewish evangelists. As you can see, they're from Judah, Reuben, Gad, Asher, Naphtali, Manasseh, Simeon, Levi, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. And there are 12,000 from each tribe. And people, I'd read, well, how do they know that they're from that tribe? They don't have to know. God knows. He knows the DNA. So he's sealing them that they have this job to do. And they're going to go out through all four corners of the earth, and they're going to evangelize. And they're going to be able to do the work that God set them out to do. And they're not going to be bothered for a time. Eventually they will. They're all going to be martyred. And one of the things, I can't say this dogmatically, but the way it sounds to me, that anyone who is saved during the tribulation time, except for those who flee to where I think it's Petra, a place prepared by God, the way it sounds, they're all going to be martyred. But there's going to be millions and millions. I heard one person say that nobody's going to be saved in the tribulation. I don't know where they ever got that, because the Revelation I'm reading said there's going to be millions and millions, untold numbers that are being saved during this time. And it's because of these 144,000 evangelists that are going out. And again, I say that there's a special position waiting for them in heaven. Verse 15 would tell us that, evidently, if I did my homework right. That is why they stand in front of God's throne and serve him day and night in his temple. And he who sits on the throne will give them shelter. So it sounds like to me they have a special place in not only God's heart, but also in his throne room. But here's one of these other questions. You know, I went out, I searched, tried to find some answers and things. I found the answers. Here's another question. On these 12 tribes that's mentioned here, what about Dan and Ephraim? They're not there. Now, why aren't they there? I've read a little bit about it, that I'm not satisfied with the answer, but why aren't they there? How'd they get substituted or knocked out and somebody else substituted in? I'm not sure. But if you get curious, you can do your own study. But I'll eventually get to that. So those are the 7 seals. That's the total overview of what the tribulation time is going to be like. Now we're going to get into the judgments. And the first thing we see is a for half an hour. With everything going on in heaven, with all the praising, all the trumpets, people getting ready, then for a half an hour, nothing but silence. I would imagine that the silence is deafening. Why God chose that, I'm not sure. I don't know if anybody could be other than that. This is a very serious thing that's about to happen upon the earth. Much of the earth is going to be destroyed. Millions, billions of people are going to lose their lives. Billions of people are going to go to hell because they rejected Jesus as their Savior. And all that, I think, is weighing upon a God who loves all of us. So it's a very serious thing. There's 7 trumpets. And each trumpet, the first one is 1/3 of the, this is not very good, I don't know if you can read that. But the first one, 1/3 of the trees and the grass will be burned. On the second one, 1/3 of the seas turn to blood. 1/3 of the fresh water turns to bitter, or becomes bitter. A third of the sun, moon, and stars turn dark. There's a special locust that comes out and stings all those who are not sealed with the seal of God, and they'll suffer for 5 months. And then a third of humans will be killed during these trumpet judgments. Remember, we said earlier, and I think it was the second seal, that 25% of the people were going to be martyred, murdered, killed through wars and like that. So there's not going to be many people left on the earth. If we assume the pre-tribulational rapture, how many millions are gone from that, and then we have 25% of the people that die, and then a third in the trumpet judgments. And then after the trumpet judgments, there's a lot more of us that's going to end up dying. So this is where we are, as best I can tell from the study that I've been doing. Remember, I said here's the peace treaty. We know that starts the 7 years. We know that. There's no dispute on that. But just before that, we have the throne, remember? Chapter 4 and chapter 5. I don't know what's going on at the earth. The Bible doesn't tell us. But there's something, I'm sure, that's going on at that time. I know that the Antichrist, when he signs that peace treaty with Israel and many nations at the start of the tribulation, it's just not somebody like me just walks up, I'll sign the thing. No, it's got to be somebody with some credibility. So I don't know if that's what's going on before that time or not. But that's what's going to happen. We also know, reading about the first seals that are open, that the rider of the white horse, which is the Antichrist, comes, and then the second one says he takes peace from the earth. Well, there's got to be peace on the earth before they take peace from the earth. Also, in this time, unless we're way off in the future sometime when all this is going to happen, and they decide to build the temple in Jerusalem, the temple would have to be built in here. I think what's going to happen is that part of this peace covenant is that especially the Orthodox Jews are going to say, they're going to demand that the temple be built. And I think that's what they're going to get. So there's going to be some peace right in here. But then the trumpet judgments will start. I would imagine, a year and a half, maybe 2 years here. Not sure. But then the trumpet judgments come in, and all this starts happening, as we'll read here. And then again, just to show you where we're going, the Antichrist is going to be wounded someplace just before the mid-trib. And then here we have the mid-trib. Over here is the great wrath or the great tribulation. Either way you want to say it's the same thing. When the Lamb broke the seventh seal in the scroll, there was silence throughout heaven for half an hour. I saw the 7 angels who stand before God. They were given 7 trumpets. Then another angel with a gold incense burner came and stood at the altar, and a great amount of incense was given to him to mix with the prayers of God's people as an offering on the gold altar before the throne. The smoke of the incense mixed with the prayers of God's holy people ascended up to God from the altar where the angel had poured them out. Then the angel filled the incense burner with fire from the altar and threw it down upon the earth, and the thunder crashed, lightning flashed, and there was a terrible earthquake. What prayer do you think was being answered here? I read this someplace and I thought, this may be right. What prayer do we often pray? I hear it a lot in our church. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. That's what's being answered here. Because, see, Jesus, although he has title deed to the earth, Satan is not willing to give it up. And I was reading Matthew 21:23, I think it was, about the vineyard owner that went away, and when he came back, the people that were trying to steal the land from him tried to kill him. And this very well may be what's going on here. Satan doesn't want to give up the earth. Even though Jesus has title deed, he doesn't want to give it up. And that's the reason we're having all these judgments. He is forcing the issue on Satan. So we see that these disasters, there's going to be 4 from above, and then there's going to be 3 from below. And I'm sure that the daily newspapers, or what ones are still running, they're going to be showing something like this. The first angel blew his trumpet, and hail and fire mixed with blood were thrown down on the earth. 1/3 of the earth was set on fire, 1/3 of the trees were burned, and all the green grass was burned. It's kind of curious to me when it says hail and fire mixed with blood. There's a little bit later in Revelation, God actually tells the people on earth, those that are not saved, he said, you wanted the blood of the saints? Here you go. And he fills the seas with blood. I think this is the same thing. You want the blood of the saints? Here you go. Here's the blood of the saints. And he's throwing this down upon the earth. And 1/3 of the earth was set on fire, 1/3 of the trees were burned, and all the green grass was burned. Now, if I have some luck with this is from the 10 Commandments.
Bow down to his will.
Nothing of this earth can make me bow to you, Moses.
Behold, the hail comes. When darkness has covered Egypt for 3 days, your ministers will send for me.
Again, I take the Bible literally. When the Bible tells me that it's going to be hail, fire mixed with blood, I think that's exactly what's going to happen. One of the things that's happening today in many circles, including some churches, unfortunately, they start to marginalize the Bible. They'll tell you that Genesis is an allegory. They'll tell you that in Revelation everything is so symbolic you can't understand it. And I've seen the attempts now where they're talking about where Moses parted the Red Sea. Well, that really was a symbolic thing. It was an allegory of something else, or perhaps it was at the low end of the Red Sea and the strong wind came through. You can't explain a supernatural event through natural means. That's a miracle of God. And that's what we have here. This is exactly what's going to happen. There's going to be hail with fire, and it's going to be mixed with blood. I don't know how he's going to do it other than he's going to do it. Then the fourth, now jump down to verse 12. Because 1/3 of the trees, 1/3 of the grass, and all that has caught fire. I'm thinking that this verse 12, where it says, then the fourth angel blew his trumpet, and 1/3 of the sun was struck, 1/3 of the moon, and 1/3 of the stars. It's very possible that because all this fire that's going on, that it's blotting out part of the sun, at least diminishing its brightness. And certainly the moon, it's going to be diminished, and you won't be able to see the stars like you once did. I don't know if you remember, this past summer we've had this, but I think maybe it was 2 summers ago that I got up one morning and the sky just looked strange. Didn't know what it was. And kind of a reddish hue to it, but it's like there's some, like not clouds, but it just wasn't very bright. And on my way down to the coffee shop, somebody told me that there was a fire in Canada. And the jet stream, I guess, got a hold of it and blew it this direction. I think that's what's going on here. It doesn't make any difference, but I think that's what's going on. So if we jump down to verse 12, it makes sense. Then the second, back to verse 8, then the second angel blew his trumpet, and a great mountain of fire was thrown into the sea. 1/3 of the water in the sea became blood. Not as blood, it became blood. 1/3 of all living things in the sea died. 1/3 of all the ships on the sea were destroyed. I don't know where the blood came from. God may have created it, but there's a lot of fish in the ocean too. So when this thing hit, there's a lot of things are going to die. I don't know if that's what it is or not. It's just going to happen, regardless of what I might think. The first 4 disasters are from above. A meteor or comet of gigantic proportions. Then a third angel blew his trumpet, and a great star fell from the sky, burning like a torch. It fell on 1/3 of the rivers and on the springs of waters. The name of the star was bitterness. In the Greek, wormwood. You've probably heard that name, wormwood. It made 1/3 of the water bitter, and many people died from drinking the bitter water. And then back to verse 12 again that we read a little bit ago. I found it interesting that I think it's right at 1/3, 20-some% maybe, of all the fresh water in the world is in South America. You know, the Amazon is a huge river, and it's a huge rainforest in that area. So it's possible that it's not like all over the world, that it's because this star is going to come down and hit the earth. It's probably going to be localized. Not that it couldn't fragment like that, but it's probably what's going to happen. This happened in the 30th of June in 1908 in, I can't pronounce the Stony Tunguska River. There was a meteor hit there. They're not sure how big it was. Something happened. I don't think they can find it. But is 770 square mile area just destroyed when this meteor hit. And that's approximately 25 by 30 miles. So you can imagine if this huge meteor hits the earth, the damage that it can do. In fact, in the Gulf of Mexico, they picked this stuff up on sonar, I think is what they did. And this comes from some authoritative sources, that if you could see beneath the water, there's a huge crater down in here. And it's, they believe that a 6-mile in diameter asteroid hit that. And I'm sure there was water there at the time, so that slowed it down quite a bit too. But can you imagine the impact, something like that, what that would have done to anybody in the coastal areas there? They would be flooded. And probably the tidal waves and like that would happen would be just catastrophic. So here comes the problem. Now you got this world ruler. He's just come on the scene. He signed a peace treaty with Israel and many nations, something that hasn't been able to be accomplished in 2,000 years. Depends on how you look at it. 2,000 years. Everything's going pretty good. He's got some issues with nations rising against nations. Remember, we said that a nation doesn't have to have boundaries. We've got blacks and whites and Jews and Christians and Muslims and like that. Things are not going to go so well. So you're going to find these nations. We got an Indian nation actually within this nation. It's defined by the laws of the land. So there's going to be nation against nation. There's going to be kingdom against kingdom. So this Antichrist person, a genius probably, and as I said, I think last week, that you honestly probably would think this is a great guy. I mean, why not? He's doing all these marvelous things. He's solving all the problems of the world, and everybody's going to love him. And it's, except by the grace of God, the elect would believe it too. But, you know, we'll see that what it is. And, of course, we won't hopefully be here at that time. But anyway, now he's got this problem. He just lost a third of the fresh water. The grass is burned. There's pollution everywhere. Probably when the grass and the trees and like that caught on fire, so went the wheat fields, so went the corn fields. And with all the clouds and stuff that's formed, you're not going to get the sun. Things are not going to grow quite right. So now the Antichrist is going to have to start allocating food, water, medicine. Can you imagine the run on medicine with all these people dying? And now we've got an ocean that's polluted with blood. Fresh fish is gone. The Japanese, I believe most of their food comes from the ocean. So now that's gone. They'll have to allocate money. Can you imagine the money market that's going on at that time? People trying to pass off $5 bills as 20s and that kind of thing. And so it's going to require some major changes in the way we do things. And I think one of the major things is going to be the mark. That's going to be coming up pretty soon. The mark becomes necessary for the equitable distribution of all the things that we need to survive. And I don't know if you guys heard about script. My mom told me about that what they would do is they would give people script that it wasn't real money, but during World War II, because everything was in short supply, that they would take this script and they could get 5 pounds of sugar or something like that. That was a way that they could limit the amount that people could get. There weren't many cookies being baked at that time, which I know is a terrible thing for a lot of people, but that's what it was. And so that's kind of, it's not the mark, but that's kind of what's going on here. They have to make sure that people don't abuse the system. The black market doesn't become something like it is today. Anytime we decide to outlaw something, somebody starts a black market system. So the mark will take care of that. Then we have disaster from below, and that's the last 3 trumpets. And it's going to be, I believe, supernatural, and we'll discuss that here in a little bit. It's going to be supernatural locusts. And then 4 angels will come and dry up the Euphrates River, and a army of 200 million will kill a third of humans. And then the 7th and the last trumpet actually ends up being in chapter 19. No, that's not right. But anyway, we'll get there. The 5th angel blew his trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen to the earth from the sky, and he was given the key to the shaft of the bottomless pit, or the abyss, or the underworld, like that. Now, this is where you got to be careful in reading. Pastor and Mick and I had discussed this one day. It says, the 5th angel blew his trumpet, and I saw a star fall from the sky, and he was given the key to the bottomless pit. If you take out this part here, if you remember your your structure from your English sentences like that, and I know we're dealing with Greek, but you can take that out, and you can say the fifth angel blew his trumpet, and he was given the key to the shaft of the bottomless pit. It wasn't the star, because this star is actually Satan falling. That's the fallen angel. That's Satan. So it wasn't Satan had the keys, because Jesus got the keys. Jesus got the keys to Hades and death. So they split that sentence, and I don't know why, but the angel has those keys. Now here's something, it just sticks out at me, and I don't know how much you guys keep track of modern events. You know, we can't predict, and we shouldn't even try to predict, but we can look at the Bible, and when we see things unfold, we can say, yeah, that applies, yeah, that applies. How many of you in here have heard about CERN? A few. Okay, let me tell you what CERN is. And this is a cloud. Supposedly, it was a picture taken above this thing I'll explain to you in a little bit while it was being active. And you can see it's a pretty scary looking sight. This is over Geneva, Switzerland. CERN is something that the idea came about in the mid-'60s, and the person who fathered this whole idea, and I've read his quote, he said he thinks that he can open a porthole to another dimension by using a black hole. That's what he's trying to create, is a black hole. So they've got this in Geneva, Switzerland, and it's called the European Nuclear Research, and it doesn't match the letters because of the difference in translation. But in Geneva, Switzerland, I think a little bit goes into France, is it? Or I think it's France or Italy. I think it's France. It's a 70 miles in circumference, 300 feet below the surface of the earth. And they've had scientists working on this since the 60s. I couldn't tell you how much copper and stuff went into this tunnel. I mean, people walk there. It's huge. The tunnels are probably like this, about like this. 70 miles. Who would ever allow something like that to go on? But what it is, it's a multiple particle accelerator. What we did was split the atom to create the atomic bomb. This is a collider. And when these things collide, it actually has a stronger magnetic pull in that area of the earth than the center of the earth has. That's how dangerous it is. I can't think of the scientist's name, the guy that's kind of all crippled up. You've seen him. He's Hawkins. He said, you guys are making a mistake. You know, they're trying to open this little hole. But what happens if that little hole doesn't want to close? But when I was thinking about that, the black hole, isn't that an abyss? That's what an abyss is. But this is something else that bothers me. When we look at one of these trumpets is blowing here, that the locusts come out. There's smoke and there's locust that comes out, and these locusts have a leader, and his name is Abaddon, or Apollyon in the Greek, which means destroyer. See this statue? That was given by the Indians, and I'm talking about the country, India. This is Shiva, and her English name is Destroyer. Isn't that amazing? The other thing that amazes me is, why would they do that? Why something that has the ability to destroy the entire earth with opening a black hole and you can't close it, and they call it the destroyer. This thing here, that's their logo. What do you see in there? If you take those things separately out and put them side by side, what do you see? 666. Why do they do that? They could have come up with anything, but why do they do that? I think they're invoking Satan. I think they're appeasing Satan. That's what it is. This very well may be the abyss when the angel comes down with the keys to the abyss. These guys want to know how to do this stuff, how to make a black hole. Let me show you how it's done, God says. Let me show you how it's done. Here's the keys. Boom, there you go. And out of that is like Pandora's box. If you remember Pandora, it's a mythological thing, that things come out. Once they come out, you can't put them back in. And these locusts, and we're going to run out of time here, and I'm not going to keep you tonight, but these locusts, they're not human. There's no reason for us to believe that they're anything but supernatural. And what they do is for those people that don't have the seal of God, they have the power to afflict them for 5 months. And they wish they could die, but they can't die. And I don't know why they wouldn't take their own life if they couldn't. I don't know. But they're going to wish they could die, but they can't. And that's the problem they're going to have. And then then there's 4 angels that are bound in the river Euphrates, and they were placed there, the Bible says, for just this time, this date, this hour, this minute. They were placed there. And he releases them. They dry up the Euphrates. And an army of 200 million obviously crossed that. And they're eventually, they're going to go around killing people is what they're going to do. But eventually they're going to go to war against Israel. Now, is it human or supernatural? The Bible describes this, that they're horsemen. And I don't know if there's something in the Greek, I don't know, that would give us a clue. But the thing is, today, there's only 70 million horses in the world. How do you get 200 million horses? How do you feed them? How do you get all those people mobilized? Again, I think this is a supernatural army. And then number 7, the time of God's wrath has come. The kingdom of the Lord is declared. And that's just before the mid-trib, where Jesus is saying, I now claim the earth is mine. And now he's going to get real serious about booting Satan out. So that's where I'm going to leave it tonight. Next week, again, I don't think you're going to want to miss it, because you're going to be a part of it and see if you come to the same conclusions that I do. We're not going to name anybody. There's no telling who the Antichrist is and like that. But I think you're going to find some interesting things, and we're going to use that disciplined study. Jason, Jason's going to close with the song tonight. The goldenrod is kind of getting my throat. Either where it doesn't matter.
Sing with me. Just as I am without one plea, but that thy blood was shed for me, of one dark blood, to thee whose blood can cleanse each spot, O Lamb of God, I come, I come.
Thank you. I did want to leave you just one more thing. I know this has been kind of a, I don't know if you call it down, but closer, and I know closer we get to heaven, things are not going to look good. But I want to leave you with this. The song, Just As I Am. There's a fellow that walked into church one day, one Sunday, and he was all kind of disheveled. His hair was unkempt, his shirt was torn, and he's wearing shorts and sandals, and obviously hadn't bathed in a while. So the pastor of the church came down to him and said, "Now, young man, before you come back next time, I want you to talk to Jesus and ask him how he would like for you to come next Sunday." Next Sunday rolled around, the same guy came in, he had his sandals on, his shorts, again, he hadn't bathed, hair unkempt, shirt was all disheveled, or kind of tattered and like that. So the pastor came back again, and he said, "I thought I told you to talk to Jesus and ask him how you should dress." He said, "Well, I did," but he said he'd never been in your church before, and he didn't know. In this church, we come as we are. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for all those that came out to listen to your word. And we have a hope that's a sure hope that we will see you in your kingdom. And we now ask that you take us from here and to our homes safely and protect us throughout the week, and let us be a witness